We're not talking about actors. We mean a real monster.
I brought her back. She'll live and I'll get her another body.
I know they're gonna kiss me, but don't let anyone see me like that. Please, Doctor, help me!
Biologically speaking, it's of primary importance that man should want to mate. Hey, that
You don't get all your kicks from surfing, do you?
We want to be free to ride our machines without being hassled by the man. And we want to get loaded.
You think you're gonna make a slave of the world? I'll see you in hell first!
The American International Podcast.
Are you ready?
Thank you for choosing the American International Podcast. My name is Jeff Markin.
My name is Cheryl Lightfoot.
And today, if you are wondering what our film is going to be, we will be covering Runaway Daughters from 1956.
Is that a Del Shannon reference?
Yes.
Only you, Jeff.
I didn't do the falsetto.
I wouldn't either. Runaway Daughters was directed by Edward L. Cahn and written by Lou Rusoff and produced by Alex Gordon for Golden State Productions.
Runaway Daughters stars Marla English as Audrey Barton, Anna Sten as Ruth Barton, John Litel as George Barton, Lance Fuller as Tony Forrest, Adele Jergens as Dixie Jackson, Mary Ellen Kay as Mary Rubeck, Gloria Castillo as Angie Forrest.
It also stars J. Adler as Mr. Rubeck, Stephen Terrell as Bobby Harris, Nicky Blair as Joe, Frank J. Gorshin as Tommy Burns, Maureen Cassidy as Maureen, Reed Howes as Henry Stevenson, Anne O'Neill as Miss Petrie, and Edmund Cobb as a private detective.
Runaway Daughters begins as so many of these old AIP movies do, with a jazzy score from Ronald Stein and a view from a car racing through the Hollywood Hills.
I think they just have the stock footage that they keep using over and over again. Then a car packed with teenagers parks in front of Audrey Barton's house. The making out commences immediately, but not all of it is consensual.
The couples here are Angela and Joe, who are in the front seat, and Audrey and Tommy, and Mary and Bobby in the back seat. Audrey calls Tommy an octopus with his many hands. From the front seat, Angela tells Audrey that she's not supposed to resist, and that's no way for a potential juvenile delinquent to act. Spurred on by this, Tommy once again jumps on Audrey, and again she pushes him off her.
Angela tells Audrey that she's setting back adolescent psychology by 50 years. Angie is setting women's rights back 50 years, and they're already not great to begin with. Mary asks Joe, the driver, to get her home now. She's late. Joe tells her that she needs to get married already, then she can relax.
Tommy says that Bobby plans to talk to Mary's father about just that as soon as he gets hold of a bulletproof vest. Then from inside Audrey's house, the sounds of a party can be heard. Angela suggests they crash it. She'd love to see those old squares when they're loaded. The kids joke about the music they hear coming from the house, and Tommy and Angie begin dancing the Charleston on the front lawn.
And everyone else claps along. Tommy gets so enthusiastic that he crashes into Audrey's front door, nearly blowing it off its hinges. Audrey's dad opens the door to see the two kids making fun of their elders, and then shuts it again. Laughing, Angie and Tommy return to the car. Audrey has gotten out of the car, and Angie gets back in. Tommy grabs Audrey, but Audrey says she can find the door to her house on her own. Tommy still insists on helping her. Angie and Audrey do a short skit making fun of their teacher, Miss Petrie, to everyone's amusement. And then the four teens leave Tommy and Audrey behind and drive away.
Tommy follows Audrey up the walk to the window of Audrey's house, and they look at the party going on inside. Tommy is impressed with the energy those old folks seem to have. They're all dancing to the old-time music.
And Tommy notices that Audrey's dad isn't dancing with her mom as Audrey cringes visibly. Inside the house, Audrey's mom, Ruth, gets an invitation to step outside to see the moon with Henry Stevenson, who is, again, not Audrey's dad. And they slink out while Audrey's dad is otherwise occupied.
Back out front, though Audrey is resisting, Tommy is insisting he get a goodnight kiss. Nobody tells him goodnight just by talking. He grabs her, and she begs for him to let her go. In the back of the house, Henry Stevenson and Audrey's mother, Ruth, take a seat outside, and he's pushing her to finish her drink.
As Audrey literally fights off Tommy and breaks away, Ruth and Henry start kissing in the back. Audrey runs out back to catch her mom in flagrante. And Tommy sees it too, and says that he went after the wrong Barton woman. He should have asked out her mom.
Then he kind of cackles as he walks away.
I wrote cackles too.
That's funny. Ruth looks up and sees Audrey staring at her. She goes over to Audrey, but Audrey runs inside. Henry apologizes to Ruth, but she shrugs it off. It wasn't fatal, she says.
They return to the party, and then we go back to Joe and the others. Joe's parking in front of Mary's place. They've got the radio blaring, so Mary tells him to turn it down. Angie reminds Mary to wipe off her lipstick. Papa Rubeck doesn't allow painted ladies here.
I'm going to take a moment to talk about the car they're driving. There's things written all over it, but we never get a good shot to really see it. But at this time, we can see there's an arrow pointing at the keyhole that says main entrance. There's an eyeball on the side.
A lot of words painted on. And
there's something attention man at, but it's cut off so we don't know what it is.
Work, I think.
And that's just one side of the car.
It's painted all around. We'll see parts of it later. I didn't write down what they wrote on it. Mary runs to her front door, followed by Bobby. Inside, we see that Mr. Rubeck has heard the car door slam. Mary does a quick and incomplete assessment of her father's whereabouts by peeking inside her front door and then closing it. She tells Bobby her dad must be asleep, and Bobby says every time he takes her home, it's like returning her to prison. But Mary says she's used to it.
Bobby asks if she's told him about them yet. She hasn't. Bobby says they could just run away and get married. But Mary says she couldn't do that. You could if you loved me enough, says Bobby.
That line. Mary asks how many ways can she prove that she loves him, and she wants him to let her know what else she can do. They embrace just as her dad swings the door open. Ain't that a sight, he asks. My own daughter making love to one of her tramp friends.
Bobby tells Mary to go ahead and tell him about them now. It's as good a time as any. Tell me what? Asks Mary's father. What I've been expecting to hear for the past year? Am I going to become a grandfather, maybe? Is that it? Mary sobs, Pop, please.
All Papa Rubeck has to do is look at Mary, and he sees her mother all over again. And this is not a compliment. Mary begs her Pop to listen to her for once. They want to get married. Papa Rubeck gives a mirthless chuckle. So you want to get married to ... And he asks Bob's name and then his age.
Bobby tells him he's 20. And Mary is 17, says Papa Rubeck. Lots of girls in high school are getting married, Pa, says Mary. Lots of tramps, you mean? And who is going to take care of you? Bobby says he's going into the service, and there will be a place for her at every camp, and they'll make out all right. Rubeck tells Bobby to go home and wipe his nose. And if he sees him talking to his daughter again, he'll take Bobby across his knee and lick him.
Pop is a freak.
Joe and Angela have been watching the proceedings from the car. There's going to be a fight, Angie says excitedly. Bobby pulls Mary towards him. Come on, let's go, he says.
Angie tells Joe to go help his friend beat up an old man. But Joe slinks down in his seat. Mary begs Bob to go home, so he stomps back to the car where Joe claims he was going to help Bob fight. Sure you were, Sir Galahad, brays Angie. Mr. Rubeck pushes his daughter inside where he berates her. He orders her not to see that boy again. Don't worry, I won't, she says bitterly. You made sure of that.
Mary wants to go to bed, but her father isn't through with her just yet.
Pop Rubeck says he got a call from Vice Principal Iverson about her schoolwork, and it's not good. Mary explodes. She didn't want to take this year. She wanted to go to business school. I will not have a lipstick stenographer in this house.
He had promised himself when her mother went out on him that he'd make something decent out of her. Maybe a teacher, maybe a librarian, something respectable. Mary asks if she can go to bed now. I will not have another evil woman in this house, he declares. Your mother was enough.
He threatens to whip her like his dad whipped him, and she throws herself into his arms. Then he tells Mary she's had too much freedom and asks, you know that I mean it, don't you? Then she sobs off to her room, and wow, this guy is scary.
In front of Angie's house, she and Joe are making out in the car. Joe looks at his watch. It's 1:30, and they have high education tomorrow.
Although if you look at the scene, it's clearly daytime when they shot this.
Angie asks him why he never goes for her like Bobby does for Mary. That's all Joe needs, a forever female. He needs that like a square hole in his head. Joe believes this is Angie's cue to go, but she's not ready to cut out yet. She climbs out of the back of the car. Are you trying to get yourself killed? Asks Joe. That's an idea, says Angie.
In a very eerie tone of voice.
Then she jumps down to the ground and she invites Joe to come up with her and listen to some music. She promises not to get fresh.
But Joe's had enough of Angie's loose cannon behavior. One of these days, pow, he says. But then she makes him admit that he's afraid of her, and he drives off as she calls him a high school punk. She goes inside her house where she lives basically alone, but now she's got a visitor. Her brother Tony is sitting on the couch.
She runs to give him a hug, then, hearing sounds from the kitchen, asks what he's got going on in there. Tony says he's brought a friend over and she's making coffee. She makes the best coffee. Did she learn it in prison? Snarks Angie. Sharp as ever, Tony smiles.
Well, she hasn't been to prison yet, as far as we know.
Then he introduces Dixie Jackson, who has just entered with a pot and 2 cups of coffee. If Angie would like a cup, she can go back to the kitchen and get one. And while she's at it, she can bring the sugar, too.
Angie sarcastically asks Dixie if she's sure it's all right for Angie to go into her own kitchen. Dixie sarcastically says yes. When Angie leaves, Dixie asks what's wrong with this kid. And Tony says that Angie's a thinker, and that makes her broody, and that makes her Angie the Terrible. Angie returns and asks what brings home the prodigal son. Tony says, what else? The fatted calf. Looks like you brought that with you, Angie snarks.
Dixie, detecting a bit of an attitude in Angie, says she should search her for poison darts. She asks Angie how old she is. 18 and 4 months, says Angela, about half her age. Dixie asks what formula Angie's mother had her on. Vinegar and what else?
Tony demands an end to the hostility so he can beg his little sister for cash. Angie explains that the treasure is away, in Acapulco with husband number 3, looking for number 4, she guesses.
Tony says he saw that in the paper. Dixie says he reads the society pages first thing in the morning. Oh, who would know that better than you, snarks Angie. Dixie looks up. What do you do, gargle with acid every morning? Tony tells them both to knock it off. Then he asks Angela about the money. She's got $18 he can have. She'd like to keep the 65 cents for the time bomb she's building. Tony gives the $18 to Dixie and tells her that should be enough to get her home.
But she's going to have to take a bus, and Dixie complains that she'll be sitting up all night. And Angie says, well, that'll be something new for you. Dixie laughs and tells Angie she's a good kid. Looks like her sense of humor is better than mine would be in that situation. On her way out, Dixie cryptically warns Tony to look out for cops. You too, he says, equally mysteriously. Dixie also warns him to look out for women, then tells Angie that if she had a setup like this house, she'd throw Tony out of a 12-story window.
She leaves, giving Tony a kiss on the cheek and saying, see you in a week. If not, I'll write you from jail.
We never learn what their business is, do we?
Now that Tony and Angie are alone again, Tony asks Angie, how's Mom? Angie says it's been 5 months since she's seen her. Tony's going to turn in, and Angie asks him to take her with him when he leaves. There's nothing for her in this town, and she hates it here. But Tony tells her she's just on a self-pity kick, and she'll feel better in the morning. Angie promises that she'll stay out of his way, but Tony says he can't even take care of himself. What's he going to do with a teenage girl?
Then Tony asks, what's there to do in Belton? Or that is the town they're in. Die of boredom, says Angie. Not me, says Tony, who vows to make something happen. He goes to bed, and Angie goes to cry next to a picture of her absent mother.
Then we go back to Audrey's house. Audrey is sitting in her room, and her mother Ruth comes in to tell her goodnight. Ruth suggests they go shopping tomorrow after school. She's trying to buy her daughter's complacency, but Audrey says that Tommy was with her and he saw Ruth macking on Mr. Stevenson too, and it's sure to be all over school tomorrow. So she would rather just stay in bed for the rest of her life.
Ruth says that Audrey shouldn't worry about what other people think about her. Audrey tells her mom that the kids at school are vicious. Ruth thinks that Audrey's Victorian streak comes from her father's side of the family.
Ruth says she's sorry she did what she did, and she's even more sorry Audrey saw what she saw.
But when Audrey's her age, she'll understand the urge to behave like a young fool when you realize half your life is behind you. Audrey squarely says that her parents aren't like most people. Ruth says, yes, she's not like most people. She's Ruth Barton. Then she leaves Audrey to sulk in her room with her dolls. Audrey flings one of her old baby dolls at the door.
The doll cries out in pain.
As does every girl in this movie.
Next day at school, Audrey, Mary, and Angie are outside sitting under a tree. A short ways away, Tommy has enlisted another girl, Maureen, to help him act out the displays they witnessed last night.
Audrey says she wishes she could climb in a hole and cover herself up. She's so embarrassed. Angie, who's sitting there badly smoking a cigarette, I don't think she's ever done that before, says that the girls should start a club and call themselves the Three Nowheres, which is terribly uncatchy.
First order of business, to declare a vote of non-competence in the world, especially the part inhabited by their parents. Mary says it's too bad their parents can't see themselves as they see them. Audrey says it's not totally their fault. She was just born in the wrong family. Angie tells Audrey the problem with her is she's too passive. But Audrey says she's turning over a whole new leaf, and Angie says that's great and to let her know when the new improved Audrey arrives.
Now Tommy and Maureen start an impromptu skit as the others watch. They're replaying the altercation between Bob, Mary, and her father. Maureen plays Mary, Tommy's Mr. Rubeck, and Joe plays Bob. Angie says that she's going to show them what active resistance looks like, but Mary begs her not to go over there. She's just going to make it worse.
Now Tommy and Maureen move on to their Audrey's mother and Henry Stevenson material. Audrey says they're about to see the new Audrey in action, and she and Angela charge into the crowd. Audrey tackles Maureen and wrestles her to the ground. Tommy and Joe hold Angie back to keep her from joining the throng.
It's one of those signature Lou Rusoff catfights that get in almost every one of his movies.
Their teacher, Miss Petrie, runs out to stop the fight. She confronts Angie. I should have known you'd be involved in this, Miss Forrest. Audrey says that Angie had nothing to do with it. I wasn't speaking to you, Miss Barton, though I'm sure if you'd been more selective of the company you keep, you wouldn't find yourself in this display now. I'm afraid I'll have to report this to the vice principal.
Angie snaps, afraid? You'll love every minute of it. Miss Petrie stomps off.
She seems offended at this.
Yeah. Tommy and Joe demand to know why Audrey doesn't have a sense of humor. You killed it, she yells. They leave her, and Audrey tells her pals that this was the first time she fought back, and it felt good. Angie says that you can never win, but it feels good to go down with a fight.
We return to Audrey's house, where Ruth is smoking a cigarette. Audrey's father, George, comes home early. Audrey follows soon thereafter. What happened to you? Asked her mother. I was in a fight, says Audrey.
Audrey says she rose above the masses to engage in a highly individualistic schoolyard brawl. Ruth says some things can be taken to extremes.
Then Audrey asks if Miss Iverson, the vice principal, called. She had said she was going to. Ruth says yes, and Audrey asked if she had mentioned that Audrey is now on the poison list. Ruth asks what that is, and Audrey tells her it's someone who has no chance of graduating this year. Ruth comforts Audrey, telling her that she takes life too seriously, and if she'd like, they can send her to a private school next year. School is just a place to go to wait for the right man to come along, so they can send her to one of the finest schools in the country, if that's what she wants. Audrey says sure, if it can be bought, they'll buy it for her, and then everything will be all right. Then she announces she's going to her room. Ruth scratches her head, trying to understand her daughter.
She never will. Mr. Barton says that Audrey really is upset this time. Maybe they should dial back the partying a little. Ruth disagrees. Audrey gets to have her fun. Why should Ruth give up hers? George hopes that Ruth knows what she's doing. Ruth claims she does. Hey, you know, starts Ruth, girls are said to be closer to their fathers than their mothers. Why don't you talk to her?
George seems a little stunned at this suggestion. Maybe he will tomorrow.
Ruth smiles because she called his bluff and she won. Always tomorrow, isn't it? She gloats.
The next day, Audrey, Angie, and Mary are walking home from school together when Bobby pulls over next to them in his pickup truck. I never thought I'd see you again after last night, says Mary. Bobby tells her to get in. He's leaving for the service on Monday and he needs to talk to her. As they drive off, Angie comments that if anyone ever wanted her the way Bobby wants Mary, she'd run out on any father in the whole stinking wide world. Just then, Tony pulls up in a convertible. He gives a wolf whistle to Audrey. He says he thought Angie might like a ride home. You don't look like a high school kid. You look 21, says Tony. Angie tells Tony Audrey's jailbait any way he looks at it, so he should put his eyes back into his head. They climb to the front seat with Tony, and Tony asks where he can drop Angie off. He and Audrey need to have a talk. Audrey says she's going only one place, home, and she's walked it many times. Okay, so I don't dazzle you, says Tony. And he puts his car into drive.
Now we're with Bob and Mary. They're cuddling together on the grass as Bob tells Mary of their plans. Bob says he's got $200 saved up for them and they'll be all right. Mary asks if Bob's told his parents about them. Bob says yes, and they gave the same answers that parents always give when they have kids that want to marry other kids. But Bob isn't a kid. He's a man at 20. Then he rolls onto her to show how much of a man he is. She stops him to say that she's not very smart. She can't put things into words very well, to which Bob rolls his eyes.
Mary continues, you know about my mother. One day my father came home from work and she was gone, ran out on him. And he's been taking it out on you ever since, says Bobby. He's built his whole life around me, says Mary. It hasn't been good for either of us. She says she's thought about running away many times. She's even started packing. But then she imagines him sitting at home, thinking the second woman in his life ran out on him. Bobby sits up. You owe me something too, Mary. Mary says maybe they can wait a little while. Sooner or later, her father will have to start thinking of her as a woman. Maybe then it will be different.
But Bob whines that he doesn't want to wait. He's going to take her home. She asks for a kiss first, and then they roll onto the blanket as the scene fades to Tony dropping Audrey off at home. Angie sits between them. Tony offers to pick Audrey up at 8 p.m. that night. And at first Audrey refuses. She's not in his league, but Tony wants to promote her.
Angie says Tony doesn't stand a chance with Audrey. She's a thinking type. Audrey reaches her front door and finds a note from her mother saying she and her father will be gone for the week. Audrey calls on to Tony that she'll be ready tonight at 8, and Tony laughs at his little sister's lack of faith.
And now back with the other couple in the soap opera, Bob and Mary. They're smooching in her driveway. Her dad isn't home from work yet. Bob asks if he's going to see her again before he leaves. Mary doesn't see how. Bob says his first leave is in 30 days, and he wants an answer then. It's marriage or nothing. Mary says, don't say that, but Bob is saying that, and he means it.
That night at 8 o'clock, Tony picks up Audrey as scheduled, and they drive around. After the date, they return to Audrey's, and Tony mixes drinks in his car. Audrey thanks him for a wonderful evening. Tony asks when he can see her again. Oh, in about 5 or 6 years, maybe, quips Audrey. Tony asks if he promises no more wrestling matches, if he promises to keep it clean. He really enjoyed spending time with her. Audrey says she enjoyed his company too, at least up till now.
She likes him. Likes him. He offers to take her to the beach tomorrow morning at 10, and she accepts. Then he asks her to see him every morning at 10. Audrey says there's a little matter of school, but Tony tells Audrey to tell the school that she's going on vacation. Audrey giggles and leaves. And then Tony smirks, but then again, that's his only facial expression.
We get a quick montage of Tony and Audrey spending their week together. Tony and Audrey are dancing. And then her parents return. So one night, when Audrey is going out again, her father challenges her. She's been out with Tony Forrest every night this week. Audrey says hanging out with Tony is a ball. He's a bum, says George. Are you telling me I can't go? Of course not, dear, says Ruth. Audrey says there's a roadhouse opening outside of town, and Tony insists on being a first-nighter. Ruth tells her to have fun. Audrey stops to light a cigarette. Since when did you start smoking? Just something I picked up, says Audrey. I'll probably be late tonight. That's all right, dear, says Ruth. You know where the key is.
A horn honks from outside and Audrey leaves. George ponders this change in their daughter's behavior, which Ruth calls shock treatment. Ruth thinks Audrey wants them to forbid her from going out, so Ruth's applying reverse psychology. George hopes she knows what she's doing. As always, Ruth believes that she does. George sits down to read his paper, grumbling. Ruth tells him to be quiet. She's planning Audrey's birthday party.
Then we fade into Mary's house. Mary is studying at the table while her father one-notes the piano. He notices Mary holding her head, and she says she isn't feeling well and can't concentrate on studying. He just wants her to try harder. He says he's had the mail forwarded to the shop, and he throws a letter onto the table. You're invited to a party at the Bartons. You're not going. They're rich trash, and I won't have you partying at their house.
Then he sits down to the table to closely monitor her studies. She's not going anywhere, he says. Now we're back in Angie's house, where Angie smokes and dances Laura Petrie style, although Laura never smoked. Tony comes out in the living room wearing a suit.
It's not a swimsuit.
From this, we can deduce that he's going to the beach with Audrey. No, we can't, but he does say that. Angie asks when Dixie's due to return. Pretty soon, says Tony. Angie thinks that she should warn Audrey about Dixie, but it's not like that, lies Tony. Dixie is just good for laughs. He asks Angie how he looks. Like a high-class con artist, Angie says. And Tony leaves, telling Angie to enjoy the movie she was going to tonight. And Angie continues her weird little dance with her cigarette.
That night, Tony brings Audrey home to his place. Where's Angela, she says. You said she'd be here. Oh, she probably just went to the corner store for some cigarettes. He tries to get Audrey to have a drink, but she'd rather not. She suggests they put on some music, and they start to dance. But Tony moves in fast. What's a guy got to do to kiss you, to marry you? She struggles against his advances as the front door opens, and in walks Angie and Dixie.
Angie tells Dixie they're just rehearsing the school play, but Dixie thinks it looks like a new dance step, the Tony Skunk Hop. Tony asks Dixie if she got her old man's money. Dixie said that her dad only had $300 and gives it to him. Tony's happy for now. Dixie congratulates Audrey on her release from Tony's clutches. Audrey says that she needs to go home. Dixie compliments Audrey's setup, even though she's never been there, and said she wouldn't trade the key to Audrey's front door for 10 Tonys or 20. Tony offers to drive Audrey home, but Dixie declares that she's doing it and demands that Tony go pack. They have to leave for L.A. tomorrow because she's got something lined up.
Dixie and Audrey leave, and Angie again asks Tony to take her with him when he goes. He tells her she has it made here, and anyway, he's got to go pack.
Tony says he has nothing to give Angie. Angie says that she's so lonely she could start a fire. Tony promises to send her cheery letters from Los Angeles. He goes to pack, and Angie goes to talk to her mother's photograph.
The next day at school, Angie and Mary are sitting on the lawn again. Angie asks Mary if she's going to Audrey's party, but Mary says she can't go. We sure drew ourselves a rotten lot of parents, says Angie. Not if you ask them, we didn't, says Mary. Angie says she's received a letter from her mother yesterday. They're bored with Acapulco, so they're off to Buenos Aires. But that doesn't matter. Angie's leaving this town. Mary asks where she's going. Angie says she knows Tony's address, so when she gets there, he'll have to take her in. Mary wishes she could go with her. Why don't you, asks Angie? But Mary is unable to answer that question.
At that point, Audrey comes out of the school as Maureen and a gaggle of girls and Joe cluster under a tree. Maureen makes a snide remark about how she wasn't invited to Audrey's party because she's not into drinking and dating older men. Audrey hears this but keeps walking and joins Angie and Mary. She's just trying to get a rise out of you, Mary snips. Audrey doesn't care. Angie tells Audrey that she's leaving town. Audrey says, you're always saying that. But Angie means it this time. L.A. is a glowing candle and she's a moth.
Miss Petrie comes out of the school just as Angie lights up a cigarette. Mary and Audrey warn Angie that Miss Petrie is coming and to put it out or she'll be expelled. No better time than now, says Angie. Miss Petrie comes over and demands that Angie put out that cigarette and that, in her day, girls didn't sprawl out in the grass. Not in public anyway, Angie retorts. Miss Petrie's jaw drops at the insolence. She goes to pull up Angie, calling her a filthy little vagrant. But instead, Angie pulls Miss Petrie to the ground. Angie picks up a rock and stands over her. You've given me the last bad ride, you water-veined old hag. You tell the principal that he can't expel me because I quit.
Angie yells at Miss Petrie to get up, and Joe helps her stand.
Miss Petrie stomps off and Angie mimics her as she goes. Then Angie turns to face the crowd. I'm going to give Miss Torture Chamber a real goodbye, she says, and with that, she throws the rock through the school window. So long, suckers, Angie says before flouncing off, followed by Mary and Audrey.
And now we're at the day of Audrey's birthday party. Ruth is rearranging furniture as Audrey comes home. She asks Audrey to help her do this. Audrey wants her mom to cancel the party. Ruth says no. She's invited all of her close friends. I have no close friends, yells Audrey. Nonsense, yells her mother, who informs her that all of them will be green with envy when they see what she and her dad are giving her as a present. Well, it's one of the presents. They also have that trip to Europe in the fall.
Audrey says her mother just doesn't understand her at all.
Audrey defends being unlike her mother, who says that Audrey has her father's flair for mediocrity. But don't worry, Ruth's arranging everything. Audrey threatens to leave home if they humiliate her. Ruth says that she had hoped Audrey's escapades with Tony would have lightened her up a bit, but instead the darkness overwhelms her. Audrey wishes that her mom understood her. Ruth says she thought she did.
Then we go back to Mary's house. She's clearing the table when the phone rings. She answers it. It's Bobby, and he's in town. He asks when he can see her. Mary looks over at her father, who is staring at her, and says, I'm sorry, Audrey, but I won't be able to come to your birthday party. I'll see you Monday. She hangs up, and her father tells her to go back to her studies. He'll clean up in here. Then we check in with Angie, who is packing for her departure. She's wearing her party dress, because priorities.
And now it's party time. Audrey's wearing a fancy strapless frock. She goes to find her dad, who's alone, pre-gaming at his bar. He thinks that she looks great, but he's pretty liquored up right now. Audrey tells her father she hopes he and her mother will leave her friends alone to have the party, but her dad scoffs. Alone? With no chaperone? Your mother would never. Then he drops a bomb. They've invited their own friends over for a little secondary party on the premises. One of those couples is the Stevensons. Audrey's upset and predicts that they'll all bother each other. George scoffs again. That's adolescent talk. Audrey pleads, but George defers to Ruth in this, as in all things, and says that the gift that they've got her will make up for everything. She leaves, and he wonders, kids, how are you going to figure them out?
Back at Mary's house, her father is asking her why she won't see the doctor for the headache she's been having, and he bets that she'd feel better if she went to that party, wouldn't she? He asks her what subject her first exam is in. She says French, and he says everyone should know French, but this is not the conversation she wants to be having.
Mary bursts out that she'll never graduate, and her dad threatens her with summer school, night school. He'll make a decent girl of her yet.
I'm not a little girl, she says. I'm a woman. A man wants to marry me. Heh, I know what he wants. The license costs $2. It's cheap. There's a point of no return, Pop. One day I'll reach it. He says he doesn't understand her, but she's not going to explain it. She's going to sleep.
At the Bartons, Audrey's party is going great. For George and Ruth, that is. The kids are dead bored, and a lot of them are outside. We see Joe and Tommy brave going in the house. But Angie and Bob are going to wait outside the front door. Bob's wearing his army uniform, and he's anxious because it's after 11. Mary was supposed to be there by then.
Her father's probably got her chained to the bedpost, Angie helpfully offers. Angie says she's going in, but Bobby's going to wait outside for Mary. Angie goes inside and finds Audrey and asks if there's no way to get rid of the elders. Audrey says she's tried, but no dice.
Angie says that this is her goodbye party. She's catching the bus to L.A. at 2 a.m. that night.
Joe and Tommy start commentary on the old-style dancing. The song ends and Ruth goes over to Audrey. The party is kind of a dud, admits Ruth. It wouldn't be if you'd leave us alone, says Audrey. Ruth isn't buying this, though. She starts inviting the kids to join her on the dance floor, but they all just stare at her. Ruth then grabs Joe and forces him to dance with her, as Audrey dies of embarrassment. Then she lets him go when she realizes everyone is laughing at them.
Specifically her.
Audrey looks very disappointed and runs off.
George goes over to Ruth and concedes that Audrey may have a point. They should take their friends and go, but Ruth doesn't admit defeat, ever. She runs up to Henry to ask if there's any gin in the house. Her house. Henry says there's 3 bottles worth. She asks Henry to conceal a bottle in his coat. They're going to spike the punch. Ruth provides cover as Henry dumps the entire bottle in the punch bowl. Let's see how this goes.
Back at Mary's house, we see it's late enough that she's able to sneak out to head to the party. And then back at Audrey's house, Angie walks into Audrey's room where Audrey is sulking on her bed. Angie tells Audrey to come back downstairs. Audrey's mother had waved her magic wand and saved the party. Back at Mary's house, Mary's father realizes that Mary isn't there and heads out to find her.
At the party, Audrey witnesses all the carousing and still isn't happy. And then we go outside to see Bob still waiting impatiently. Back inside, the drunken revelry continues, and George excitedly tells Ruth that the present has been delivered. And then the phone at the Bartons rings and Audrey takes the call. She listens for a while, and then after it's over, goes to tell her father that the neighbor called, and says that he's going to sick the cops on them if they don't lower the party volume. George poo-poos this once again, promising to buy her a policeman for her birthday.
Audrey asks Angie what time she's catching that bus. Angie tells her, and Audrey says that she's coming with her. Mary finally arrives, and Bobby goes outside to see her. He tells her he's being sent away for 6 months, so it's now or never for that marriage thing. But Mary says she doesn't want to run away like it's a dirty thing she's doing. Bobby tells her she's got to make a choice. It's either him or her father. Don't say that, sobs Mary. He continues, it's either hello or goodbye, and she continues sobbing. I guess it's goodbye, he says. But I'm entitled to this much at least, and he kisses her.
And of course, this is the point where Mary's father comes up to the house. He catches Mary kissing Bob and calls her a liar, a cheap liar. It's her mother all over again. He grabs her dress and says she even looks like her mother. Mary begs her father to not abuse her in public and to do it at home, but he belts her twice as Bob just watches. Finally, Bob pushes Mr. Rubeck away, but Mr. Rubeck slugs Bobby, sending him through the front door. This time, it does crash open. Bob returns to grapple with Mr. Rubeck. They fight as the excited crowd watches. Mary tells Angie she can't take it anymore, and she wants to come with her. The more the merrier, agrees Angie.
But Mary wants to go right now. So Mary grabs her and they leave, just as the police car pulls up. What's going on here, says the officer. Just a friendly argument, says George. It's all over now. The police officer says he's following up on a report of a drunken teenage brawl. He tells Bobby and Mary's father to get on out of there and asks if anyone is willing to make a statement. Everyone is silent, so the officer says he'll give them a break and just put it down as a public nuisance call. Just keep the noise down.
All the kids go home. Then Audrey herself sends Mr. Stevenson and his missus home. Apparently shame does work sometimes with these people, but not with their mother. Ruth has no shame. Ruth thinks that they'll laugh about this later. Tomorrow even. But Audrey thinks she'll never laugh at this. George brightly says, we never showed you your gift. Audrey doesn't want it, but they push her into the driveway, where the gift is obviously a convertible under a cover. George tells her that the gift is in her name. She can do 100 in it if she wants. Audrey gets in and calmly asks for a test drive.
George says it's nearly 2 a.m., but Ruth tells her to go on ahead. So Audrey drives off, and George confronts Ruth about how she nearly messed up the whole night, and why won't she ever admit to being wrong?
George, who only has a spine when Audrey isn't around, accuses Ruth of using Audrey as her mini-me. Ruth is for once speechless.
George wishes he could just take Audrey into his arms like he could when she was a little child.
And so does Ruth. Now they learn their lesson?
Audrey takes her new convertible over to the bus stop where Angie and Mary are waiting. Get in, she says, we're traveling in class. Angie asks where she stole it, and Audrey explains it was a going-away present from her parents. Now it's apparently the next day, and we're back at Audrey's house. Mary's father is there, and he and Ruth are speaking with a police officer. The officer is taking a report from Mary's father and Ruth about the now missing Mary and Audrey. He thinks it shouldn't be too hard for them to spot 3 girls in a new convertible. But if they don't find it soon, they'll have to file a missing persons report. But not to worry, it's probably a lark. Then the policeman shows himself out. Mary's father thanks Ruth for calling him, but says he's on his lunch and has to be getting back to work. He's feeling a little guilty. Ruth assures him that Mary will come back. It's as if I killed her with my own hand, he says as he leaves.
Jeez. And now, 1 hour and 5 minutes into this film, we finally have the titular Runaway Daughters. Stupidly, Audrey has let Angie drive her new car. She's doing 90, careening around S-curves and opining to the other two that she read that man's most powerful urge is self-destruction. Wait, what?
Her eyes are wide and she's turning the wheel wildly as she drives.
Well, they all do in these old movies. And some of the new ones, too.
Then Angie suddenly pulls over. She realizes that they're going to be looking for 3 girls in a convertible, so they'll have to split up. She checks a map and says that they're 18 miles from Paisley. From there, they should be able to get a ride to L.A. Angie grabs her suitcase and instructs Audrey to go next.
Angie lays out the plan. They're going to meet at the Paisley post office at 8 p.m. But first, each one of them is to go to a grocery store and get something to eat. And be sure to get milk in bottles. Once they're in Paisley, they're going to boost another car and continue on to Los Angeles. Mary's distressed that they're graduating from runaways to car thieves, but Angie says that one thing leads to another.
Then Angie reminds them that neither of them are under contract, and they can get picked up and taken home if that's what they want. Audrey and Mary both agree to meet Angie at the post office. Angie runs off, and Audrey says she's never felt hungry before in her life. And isn't it funny? A new convertible, and she traded for a cup of coffee.
12 miles from Los Angeles, according to the sign, we see a motorcycle cop hiding at the side of the road. In their stolen car, Angie, still driving, speeds past. Angie hears the siren and speeds up even more dangerously.
Angie and the other runaways start throwing out their now empty bottles of milk. The broken glass causes the cop to lose control of his sickle, and the runaways get away.
Just want to note, though, that the cop merely stops his bike and calls it in on the radio. Nothing happens to him.
"You nearly killed him," exclaims Audrey. "That was good, clean fun, wasn't it?" says Angie. "The important thing is he's not behind us anymore." Angie pulls over again and jumps out, grabbing her suitcase. "This car's too hot now. Get out," she commands. She says they have to split up again, and they'll meet up at Tony's apartment. And isn't she good at this? She'll have to write her mother and tell her she's finally found her niche.
Angie giddily trots off. Mary and Audrey give each other a look filled with regret. Mary doesn't like this anymore. Audrey says, yeah, but they're in it now and they have no choice but to go on. They run off separately in a scene that looks a lot like the movie poster.
Now we're at Tony's apartment and we see that all three girls have arrived. The three of them and Tony are sitting around when Dixie comes in. Tony explains that the girls have flown the coop, so Dixie tells him to give them some hot cocoa and cookies and send them on home. Tony says he can't do that. They're hot. They hoisted a car and knocked over a bike cop. Dixie isn't surprised to see Angie in this kind of trouble, but how did Audrey and Mary get involved in this?
They say they have their reasons. Dixie can't believe that they swapped their cushy home lives for a crappy dump with a semi-functioning toilet and cockroaches. The idea of roaches distresses Mary, but Dixie tells her that's what you can expect now. Dixie asks if they have any money. Enough to buy you peroxide for your hair, snarks the increasingly annoying Angie. Tony says he thought that they could work for Dixie at the Mermaid. Dixie gives them all the once-over and says that with a different hairdo, Audrey could pass for 21. She looks at Angie, saying that with the right padding, she could look like a woman.
Well, if you fooled them for 45 years, then I guess I can too, snarks Angie. Now it's Mary's turn, but Dixie says that she looks too sad. She'll have to get a job slinging hash or something.
She'd have the cops asking all kinds of questions.
Dixie can get them new IDs and social security numbers, but it will cost $20 apiece, and they can pay her back when they've got the money.
After she leaves, Angie goes to hug her crappy brother. Tony looks at Audrey over the top of Angie's head, not hard to do because she's very short, and says that he wants to take her out. Little Angie looks up at her brother and accepts the invitation. Not you, says Tony, but Audrey's tired and frankly not interested in Tony anymore, though she can hardly say that now that she's living in his apartment. Tony says, it's okay. We have a lifetime ahead of us.
Then we return to the Barton residence, where George and Ruth are moping at home. It's been a week since Audrey left. George says he's hired a private detective to help track her down, and he believes that she's in the Los Angeles area. George suggests they invite some people over for a game of bridge to help distract them from their woes, but Ruth is not in the mood for company.
Wow, she must be serious. George admits that, yeah, he's not interested either. And now we're at the Mermaid dance hall. Dixie's the boss. She goes to find Audrey holding up a wall. Dixie wants Audrey to get out there and earn some money. But Audrey says, can't I just watch? Dixie tells Audrey that she's going to starve if she keeps this up, and that she should just go home. The two of them watch as a guy hauls Angie around the dance floor as if she were a rag doll. Dixie tells Audrey that even if she were out there working, she'd only be making $7 or $8 on a good night. Most girls have a side racket at gambling halls or liquor joints, or keeping men company, if you know what I mean. Audrey looks sick. It'll come naturally eventually, Dixie tells her.
On the floor, Angie bets her dance partner 5 tickets that she can guess what he does for a living. He says she's on. I'll bet it has something to do with horses, she says. He gives her 5 tickets, admits to being a horse trader, grabs her, and they continue dancing.
I bet he smelled like horses. Angie, with a handful of tickets, looks like a kid having a moderately successful night at Chuck E. Cheese. But his dancing style doesn't seem to make her very happy.
Then a man comes up to Audrey and offers her a ticket. Dixie tells her to go on and start making money. The man drags Audrey onto the dance floor, but he complains that she keeps pulling away from him. He gave her his ticket. Here, take it, she says. Take all of them. And then she runs out of the club.
I wanted to point out that this guy looks a lot like Audrey's dad. I don't know if you noticed that.
I did not.
But I thought that might be intentional. Maybe not.
As the night continues, Angie dances one dance after another, and we see Audrey dancing too, but she doesn't seem to be doing this willingly.
She keeps getting paired off with handsy old men with no rhythm. Later, Tony finds her sitting against the wall. Audrey says that she should get another job, but Tony says the cops will nab her in 2 days if she does. She might as well make a career here. He points to Angie, who successfully grabs another handful of tickets from a willing customer. Audrey's disgusted that he lets his sister do this job, but Tony says he didn't ask her to come out there, and he's not happy at how Audrey's been standing him off lately. Angie brings her little guy over to see Tony, and to subtly tell him that he has a nickel mine in Canada. Tony gets the hint and asks the guy to come outside and tell him more about that country. Angie, in a fake southern accent, drawls that she'll join him later. Outside the club, Tony rolls the little guy and steals all the Canadian dollars out of his wallet.
Dixie goes to Tony's apartment to find Mary sobbing on the bed. Dixie tells her she should go back home and she'll give her a ride to the bus station. But Mary says she can't go back. She's going to have a baby. Wouldn't he marry you? That louse. Mary explains that he doesn't know about it. She only found out herself a few days ago. He's in the army and she doesn't know where he's stationed. He's not on the moon, says Dixie, and she helps Mary write a letter explaining the situation. Because, as Mary said, she doesn't do good with words. She then has Mary put Bobby's last known address on it and assures her she'll find him for her.
The letter is very simple. Dear whoever, I'm having a baby. Your baby. Mary tells Dixie that she had to tell someone, and she's glad that it was Dixie that she confided in. Dixie tells Mary to warn Angie to lay low now. The cops have her description from the drunk that Tony robbed. Dixie leaves, hoping to soon rid herself from this kindergarten.
Later, Angie and Mary are both holed up in the apartment when Tony knocks on the door. He says there's a telegram from Mary. It came addressed to Dixie. Mary's too nervous to read it, so she has Angie do it. It's instructions for Mary to take a flight to Baltimore to join Bobby. Mary goes to pack. She's going to him and she's going to be his wife. Angie is distraught. The next to leave will be Audrey, and then she'll be right back where she started. Why don't you go on home, sis, says Tony. But where's home, says Angie. A one-bedroom apartment in a one-horse town, a hotel room in Acapulco, a cabin in a cruise ship.
Tony tells her there's nothing for her here either. Angie wants them to run off together. Tony says she's just a kid and then leaves her.
Mary is ready to leave, but then realizes she has to write to her father.
Personally, I wouldn't tell him anything.
Angie is feeling very alone.
Back at the Merry Maid dance hall, Dixie grills Audrey about why she stays. Dixie tells Audrey that she and her mom could figure it out together if she just would go home. Dixie points to the other girls in the dance hall lineup. They look pretty worn out. Dixie predicts that that's how ragged Audrey will look in 2 or 3 years if she's not in jail.
Dixie advises that Audrey is doing this to hurt her mother, but she's really only hurting herself. And look at Angie. She's got a mouth on her, but she's really a scared, lonely little girl who doesn't know how to act like one. Audrey says none of that matters. She's going to start a new life for herself. Dixie asks if this new life will involve the big play Tony is making for her. And has he offered to marry her yet? That's his trump card.
Audrey looks sullen. Then 2 guys come in. Dixie commands Audrey to get to work for her new life's sake. She lines up, but it's not 2 customers. It's 1 customer and 1 private detective.
Dixie tells him it's 2 dances for a quarter, special deals for cops. What about private detectives, he asks. Oh, we don't even talk to them, says Dixie. The man offers to come back with a cop if that's what he has to do. Then he pulls on a photo and says the bouncer said that this might be Lola Marshall. And he asks where Lola is now. Dixie tells him that she's taking a break in the back room. As he heads back there to talk to her, Dixie goes to Audrey and tells her to go out the side door.
Now we're back at Tony's apartment. Except it's not Tony's apartment anymore, and he has to knock on his own door. The girls have taken it over. Audrey crosses to the other side of the room as he sits at the table with Angie. She asks about getting another job. Tony tells Angie she can't get another job. She's hotter than a candle in the Sahara. Angie asks what's going to happen to her. Tony says that it's a little late to ask now. He never asked her to come out there. Angie wants to go for a ride, but Tony does not. However, she's able to get Tony's car keys so she can go off on her own. Before she goes, Tony tells her to keep to the side streets.
Audrey looks nervous, and Tony notices this. Oh, don't worry, baby. I'm not sticking around. And Tony leaves. Angie goes over to Audrey and says, bye. You say that like you're going to Africa or something, says Audrey. Maybe even farther, says Angie. She gives her friend a kiss and leaves.
Outside, Angie runs to her brother's car. Cops are already standing by and can't ignore her tearing out of there. They start the chase, which leads them from the city out to the hills. Angie drives straight off a cliff. And it's sad that she's dead now, but at least she took Tony's car with her. The cops get out of the car and run down to where Angie's body is lying, remarkably unbroken. Another statistic moralizes one cop, and the other says that he'd swear she did that deliberately. But the older cop doesn't get it. Kid like that's got everything to live for.
Back at the apartment, Tony lets himself in. His key still works.
He's decided to finally get serious about assaulting Audrey.
Audrey says she has nothing to say to him. He feels differently. And back at the Mermaid Club, the detective has brought George and Ruth Barton. George tells Dixie they're looking for Lola Marshall. Dixie says that Lola quit last night, but tells them to have a seat.
Dixie looks at Audrey's mother and says she thought Ruth would be a lot younger, which kind of stings Ruth's pride. Ruth says that she's aged a lot in this last week. George offers to make it worth Dixie's while to tell her where Audrey is, and Dixie gets in a dig about how he's throwing his money around again. Ruth just wants to talk to Audrey. Dixie says that she'll tell Audrey if she sees her, and then gets the name of the hotel where the Bartons are staying and says that she'll call them there. As they go, she tells them to get their Seamus off her tail or she's not going anywhere. So the detective leaves too.
At the apartment, Tony approaches Audrey and throws her onto the bed, so it'll be the hard way. Dixie enters. Pardon me, is this where I catch the helicopter to Honolulu? Audrey and Tony both jump up. Was this the big one, Audrey? The marry me and I'll take care of you? He pulled it on me once and he hasn't stopped using it since. Then Dixie notices that Angie isn't there. Tony says she went on a little joyride. You let her go just so you could take a crack at Audrey? Dixie asks. She wanted a change of scenery, shrugs Tony. Oh, you are a heel, growls Dixie. You're not even good enough for me. She tells Tony to take a walk and then sits Audrey down for a talk.
Dixie tells Audrey that her parents are in town and they're not the same parents she left behind. Just look for the flaws in yourself when you see theirs, and you'll be fine. Audrey asks when she's going to see Dixie again. Never, if you're lucky, says Dixie. Audrey asks Dixie to say goodbye to Angie for her, and Dixie leaves. Later, as we see Audrey finishing her packing, Audrey's repentant parents arrive and they embrace. And that's the end.
You're listening to the American International Podcast, where we're discussing Runaway Daughters from 1956.
I don't have attribution for this, but I read that the script was allegedly based on an incident that writer Lou Rusoff came across when he was working as a social worker. However, I did find Buddy Mason's column, published in October of 1956, where he wrote that in doing research for Runaway Daughters, producer Alex Gordon checked on 1,001 case histories and police files. He discovered that runaway girls seldom find the fame and fortune they seek in a big city. However, what actually becomes of them does make interesting film fare.
In his autobiography, Sam Arkoff said Runaway Daughters best personified Alex Gordon's love for seasoned actors, writing about how hard Gordon lobbied Arkoff to give Anna Sten top billing. Arkoff refused, saying Sten was past her prime by more than 20 years. Gordon thought it was a coup to get Sten. Arkoff countered it would be more of a coup de grace, as their coveted teenage audience would have no idea who Sten was. Gordon promised Arkoff that columnists like Hedda Hopper and Luella Parsons would give the casting plenty of column inches, and they did.
Arkoff said that though Gordon tried to explain to Sten that Runaway Daughters had a low budget, $90,000, Sten was still expecting champagne and caviar treatment from the studio that, in Arkoff's words, were more accustomed to ordering Pepsi and tuna sandwiches on rye. So Sten showed up to the set in a limo she rented for herself with her own supply of bubbly and fish eggs. Sten also complained about having to share a dressing room with Adele Jergens, until Gordon explained to her the limitations they were under. Then she accepted the accommodations graciously.
In the book Faster and Furiouser, Mark Thomas McGee, quoting Alex Gordon, wrote that Mary Ellen Kay was cast because Gordon had enjoyed her work in some of her Republic and United Artists films. But Gordon and Cahn had a hard time finding that third lead, and auditioned more than 100 young actresses with no luck. They were about to give up for the day when they spotted Gloria Castillo sitting in the reception room. She told the two that she was determined to get that part.
Adele Jergens' casting was announced on July 18, 1956, in the LA Times. In the July 19th edition of the Los Angeles Citizen News, a blurb announced that Tutch Connors and Gloria Castillo would also star. Lance Fuller's casting was announced in July of 1956 in the LA Times. At that time, columnist Edwin Shallard pointed out that he had 5 unreleased films, one of which was Girls in Prison.
A Hollywood Reporter production chart also added Sid Saylor, Buddy Mason, George Dockstader, and Eddie Baker to the cast. And a blurb in the Los Angeles Citizen News in August of 1956 claimed that silent screen stars Eve Novak, Franklin Farnham, Stuart Holmes, Bess Flowers, and Joe Gilbert had been signed by Alex Gordon. They appear as party guests.
Tom Conway, who is included in the cast in Hollywood Reporter's production charts, originally played George Barton, but became ill with a brain hemorrhage and was hospitalized shortly after filming began. According to McGee, he was replaced by John Litel, whom Gordon found by flipping through the publication Players Directory. Gordon called Litel's agent to see if Litel could do it. 15 minutes later, the agent called me back and said that John was in his car and would meet me at the studio at 10:30.
That same Buddy Mason column from October 1956 detailed the chaotic first steps the crew made when they found out Conway would be unable to finish the film. Production supervisor Bartlett A. Carroll exploded into action. There were phone consultations with executive producer Samuel Z. Arkoff, producer Gordon, and director Cahn. Script changes were made, actors were recalled, and technicians notified. Script revisions, substitutions, shooting order, and new shifts must be relayed to all departments. By some miracle, Carroll had the unit following at 8:30 the next morning, right on the schedule. The column called John Litel a veteran trooper who was memorizing script dialogue while Carly Taylor applied his makeup.
Runaway Daughters was shot at Academy Films. Edwin Shallot of the LA Times, in his column published August 1, 1956, reported that Nicky Blair, who played Joe in Runaway Daughters, showed so much promise in the rushes of that movie that producer Alex Gordon had secured him a 2-picture deal and will star him in Monster on the Ice with Mary Ellen Kay. A day later, Shallot wrote that Gordon was securing the rights to Anna Sten's 1932 film The Tempest that they would shoot in England. However, that never happened.
Shallot's December 21, 1956 column said that Stephen Terrell, star of the recent Runaway Daughters, had been signed to a 15-picture deal by Samuel Arkoff and Alex Gordon at a rate of $3 a year for 5 years with an option for a 4th. His first picture after making that deal was Dragstrip Girl, but after that film, Terrell only made 2 more films for AIP.
Runaway Daughters was released on the bottom half of a double bill with Shake, Rattle, and Rock on October 31, 1956.
Taglines for Runaway Daughters include, "The shocking story of teenage girls in revolt against today's delinquent parents."
They called her Jail Bait.
"Revolt of the Teenagers."
Why do teenage girls run away from home?
In his autobiography, Arkoff wrote, whether the films were focused on music, fast cars, juvenile delinquency, or teenage horror, they were designed to tap into the interests and tastes of America's adolescents. With no lack of modesty, our own trade newsletter, American News, credited us with the rebirth of the movie habit among young Americans.
In his column, published in January of 1957, Ed Hokura wrote that in Buffalo, Runaway Daughters and Shake, Rattle, and Rock were further ahead at the box office than War and Peace and Giant, which only goes to prove that the only way to get people to go to the movies today is to give them pictures with titles that promise cheap thrills. But such is the case only in a few cities. These same pictures are running a poor second and third in other cities, according to Variety. It's the teenagers who are responsible for these pictures doing their fantastic business in certain cities. But while they turn out in large numbers during the day, these theaters are almost empty at night.
Box Office Magazine said in their review that Runaway Daughters was of a slightly better caliber and longer length than the regular twin-billed films turned out by American International, with a capable cast, a few familiar faces, and an exploitable title and theme.
A blurb in the Lancaster, Ohio Eagle Gazette said Runaway Daughters and Shake, Rattle, and Rock were tales of America's juveniles today. They are not expensive films, but descriptive. The Catholic newspaper The Messenger warned readers that Runaway Daughters was a Class B film of low moral tone. Lowell E. Reddlings, reviewing the film for the Los Angeles Citizen News, wrote, the film is below average for its category, but adds balance and variety to the double bill. And columnist Walter Winchell wrote a brief review of Runaway Daughters saying the film, quote, offers one of those plots they keep around studios in mimeograph form.
Margaret Harford of the Los Angeles Mirror wrote, the girls who become runaway daughters in the new film of the same name are more to be pitied than censured. They have problem parents, and their parents easily rank among the nuttiest problems of the season. Marla, Gloria, and Mary Ellen must have been cast more for beauty than for talent. Adele Jergens as a brassy dance hall dame and John Litel as Marla's worried father contribute more in the way of acting experience.
The review in the Springfield, Massachusetts Union said of Runaway Daughters, under Edward Cahn's direction, nothing much is solved in the relationship between parents and offspring, which seems to be a personal matter anyway.
The review in the Springfield, Massachusetts Republican reported that teenagers in the audience, and they comprised 90% of it, were enthusiastic about the twin bill of Shake, Rattle, and Rock and Runaway Daughters. They jeered when the old maid school teacher ordered a pupil to dispose of the cigarette she was smoking on the school lawn, and they cheered when the girl, rebellious at such interference, knocked the teacher to the ground. The reviewer concluded, Runaway Daughters doesn't even have any music to make the end come more quickly. It's probably the dullest collection of neurotics yet assembled for public consumption.
Runaway Daughters was one of the first AIP films offered to television through the Screen Entertainment Corporation in 1964, which was before American International Television was created.
Runaway Daughters was remade for the Showtime cable television series Rebel Highway in 1994. That version starred Julie Bowen, Holly Fields, and Jenny Lewis and was directed by Joe Dante. Well, Cheryl, we've been discussing Runaway Daughters, but I've yet to hear your opinion on the film. What did you think about this one?
I'm surprised you haven't heard any of my opinions yet, because I did put in a little snide remark here and there when we were doing the synopsis. And I remember the first time we watched it, about, halfway through, I realized this is a soap opera, not a movie. This reminds me of the old General Hospital or All My Children episodes that I used to watch when I was a kid, sitting next to my mother on the couch. It's melodrama taken to the extreme, and it doesn't play like a serious movie for a lot of it, although the ending obviously has some very grave tones to it.
But nothing you wouldn't expect from an AIP film of this era.
No, but I think they escalated a lot from, let's say, Girls in Prison even. I just think the drama was more dramatic. The parents are so cartoonishly terrible. There's no nuance there. There's no balance. They start terrible and they continue being terrible. We don't see Mary's dad have any kind of remorse. We never see Angie's parents.
We do only see 3 of 6 potential parents here, and 2 of them have really weird accents.
True. We're not going to make fun of their accents by trying to imitate them. But Anna Sten, I think she's Scandinavian.
She was born in Kiev, which was then part of the Russian Empire. And she did work in Germany for a few years in the 30s, which is probably why she sounds like a Gabor.
She does sound like a Gabor. And then Mary's father, obviously we're not going to imitate his accent either. But if you've ever seen the movie The Jazz Singer with Laurence Olivier, I think that's the one. I have no son. That's what he sounds like. But their family's Catholic, so that was a bit of a puzzler. And he's just the worst of the parents. Even Angie's absent mother is a better parent than he is. He is so abusive. It's hard to watch. And to see how all three girls are suffering from abuse left, right, and center. The only good person in this whole movie is Dixie. And she's not a good person, but to them she is. She's their fairy godmother.
I think something that struck me that I didn't catch until the second time through is that Angie is not the main character, but she seems to be because she's so much of this movie. She's a lot of everything.
She fills up the screen with being loud and obnoxious, and everyone else stands around sulking. Angie's out there breaking things, screaming, and she aims to misbehave.
Right.
She does.
Desperately wants to be a main character, but this is Audrey's story.
It is, because she's the final girl, you could say, in this movie.
And she's probably the least of the Runaways in terms of interesting storyline.
Yeah, she's very sulky, and that's just about all she has going for her.
Yeah, she's rich. I feel very sorry for her.
I mean, her parents are objectively bad, but they're not Mary's dad bad, and they're not abandoning your kid forever bad, leaving a high school senior to live alone in an apartment forever. I guess they must pay the rent because she's not kicked out, but they're not there. Husband number 3 and mom are gone. I don't even know when they're going to find out that their daughter's dead. And if they do, will they even care? Movie doesn't address it.
No, hopefully Tony at least will feel a tinge of guilt for sending her out there.
I kind of wish that she had taken Tony with her over the cliff. We saw him in Girls in Prison, and he was just as smarmy and unlikable there as he is here.
Yeah, previous to Runaway Daughters, Lance Fuller had appeared in Apache Woman, which we have yet to watch for the podcast. And Girls in Prison would follow Runaway Daughters. And he appears again in The She Creature and Voodoo Woman, both of which we have coming on future episodes.
Yay. One day. Marla English is in The She Creature, too.
She is. And Runaway Daughters is interesting because there's so many cast members who we've seen before and would see again. It was like the last hurrah for some of them, and then bring in the new cast members who would be in AIP films for the next couple of years.
And then with the producing, directing, writing team of Cahn and Gordon and Rusoff, it's like a greatest hits of AIP, this film.
It is. So it's kind of surprising that it comes so early. It's 1956.
Mm-hmm.
Adele Jergens, who played Dixie here, first appeared in Outlaw Treasure for AIP, well, for ARC, and The Day the World Ended, and then would appear again in Girls in Prison, which we did a few weeks ago. She's
kind of the same character there and here. She's a con artist, but here she has a heart of gold, and there she was a prisoner who was not above killing people if she had to.
And Marla English, after Runaway Daughters, would go on to do The She Creature, like we said, Flesh in the Spur, which we did, and in Voodoo Woman as well. This is the first appearance in AIP for Steve and Terrell, who would go on to do 3 more films, all of which we've covered: Dragstrip Girl, Invasion of the Saucer Men, and Motorcycle Gang. And we have Frank Gorshin as Tommy, Dragstrip Girl, Hot Rod Girl.
Punk Rock Girl? No, wait. That's a song by the Dead Milkmen.
Invasion of the Saucer Men, and Tank Battalion, and Record City, which also has Nicky Blair, who played Joe.
Oh, wow. I didn't realize that.
Funny, I mentioned this, we did Record City. They have a scene together. Joe plays the wino to Frank Gorshin's Chameleon. They bump into each other, and Joe says, "Haven't I seen you somewhere before?" And I always wondered if that was a reference to Runaway Daughters, because that's the only other shared credit that they have.
Oh, wow. That's interesting.
So in my mind, at least, that's what that's referring to.
I'm sure it is.
Or he might have just been on the street and saw the chameleon in one of his disguises.
No reason it can't be both.
But Nicky Blair would also appear in Jet Attack, Submarine Seahawk, and Truck Stop Woman, which was re-released by AIP. Gloria Castillo made her first appearance in Runaway Daughters, and she would go on to appear in Invasion of the Saucer Men and Reform School Girl.
She was better in both of those movies than she was here. Here, she's just so over the top.
Very much over the top. I think she's a lot more fun to watch in this one, but I don't think it's a better performance.
She starts at 11 and then goes up from there.
And I do have one more. Jay Adler, who played Mary's father, does have a small part in Macon County Line.
That's right. We did that one too. Tell me some of your opinions on the movie.
I think it's amazing that Gloria Castillo's Angie is one of the only characters who does not get smacked at all at any point in this movie, because she's the one probably most deserving of it.
We don't say that anymore. She needs to be calmed down by some external force, I think, because it's not coming from within. But everyone fails her in this movie. The school system failed her. Her parents failed her. Her brother's not there for her.
But boy, she got a mouth on her. She meets Dixie for the first time. This is a woman who's hanging out with her brother, so she already knows what kind of woman she is.
Mm-hmm.
But she is not polite.
No, and she should be just as rude to her brother, because her brother's a bad guy too. I think she just resents the fact that she's finally not alone, except they have company and she can't just talk to her brother, sis to bro. There's this interloper there. So I don't think it's really she's against Dixie. I think she's just against the idea of having anybody else there. But yeah, her barbs are very sharp and quite to the point.
And entertaining as a spectator.
Oh, yeah. And probably the best part of this movie. She has the liveliest dialogue. They gave it all to her. Her and Dixie have the liveliest dialogue.
And the wildest eyes. She's always wide-eyed and crazy looking.
But yeah, the two of them kind of make the movie what it is. Everything else is depressing and dreary, rapey, unpleasant. But Dixie and Angie, I could watch a whole movie about those two. Like Thelma and Louise style. They both go over the side of the cliff. They promised Runaway Daughters. We don't get that for 65 minutes of movie time. And then it just ends up being this morality tale, a cautionary tale of young girls trying to flee their terrible home lives and getting smacked down into it.
They spend a lot of time establishing the terrible home lives.
Yeah.
Giving them a reason to run away.
This movie is way too long.
And because of that, the movie kind of just plods along, but it's never boring. And the performances, especially Gloria Castillo's extreme overreacting, make it very watchable. It's fun to watch.
Yeah, I'm not saying I don't like the movie, but I can't just say I like it. I have to offer some critique. And my critique is it's very long. The introduction of this, well, you shouldn't do that moral tale, it just feels ham-fisted and unnecessary. The quick turnaround of Audrey's parents from their hands-off parenting style to, well, I guess maybe we should give a damn about our daughter. It just doesn't feel earned. It feels really forced. I don't believe that they're going to be better parents. I don't think Audrey should believe them. But for the movie's sake, we have to. And I think that's a flaw. Not that it's not a great movie to watch, and I wouldn't tell you not to watch it, but just look out for that.
Yeah, and I think that they gave the parents a bit more story than they usually would in an AIP film. And that's Alex Gordon promoting these older actors who aren't working otherwise and giving them a job.
Yeah, I didn't realize he was such a serial hirer of elderly actors. But
well, we've seen it. We saw Shake, Rattle, and Rock.
Right. Didn't realize that until the last batch of movies that we just went through. We've done quite a few of these 1950-something movies in the past few weeks. So it really is hammered home to us.
And Anna Sten, who played Ruth Barton, who Alex Gordon wanted to give first billing to.
She got second billing.
And whether it's earned or not, she does have a character arc.
It's unbelievable, but it's there.
It's there, yeah. She has a turnaround, and I'm not sure that the events that led to it should have caused it, but it did. We saw it in the film, so that's what happened.
Because you'd think that with her laissez-faire parenting, she'd be just like, oh, Audrey's off having an adventure. That's so interesting for her. She wouldn't be the very next day like, oh, woe is me, our daughter ran away. I must be a terrible mother. And it did seem like they were kind of coming to that conclusion the night before. But Audrey's dad is completely hands-off, no real spine on him. He's not ever going to override her mother to say, you know what, why don't you lighten up on her, or actually heavy up on your daughter. She needs some guidance. She needs some parenting, not debauchery that she encounters every night.
Well, he does question her, but he doesn't question her to the point of contradicting her.
Nope, it's you know best.
When Ruth says that Audrey was just trying to get a rise out of them with the cigarette and everything, she applied the reverse psychology, telling her to go out and have a good time rather than telling her to stay home, because Audrey wanted them to tell her to stay home. And George is like, well, why didn't we?
Audrey does want to be parented. That's why she's rebelling, because there's nobody there. Angie wants to be parented too. I mean, she has no prayer of that. They're not hands-off parents. They're completely invisible parents. They're not there.
Having once been a teenager myself, I don't know if that would have been enough to get me to try to run away. I might see that as a plus.
All kids are different. They're not all going to react the same. I myself had sort of I wouldn't say hands-off parents, but my parents were divorced and they were both busy with work and stuff. And a lot of our teenage years, my brother and sister and I, there wasn't somebody over our shoulder all the time. And there was a bit of trouble there. I'm not complaining and nothing really bad happened, but maybe somebody could have checked in a little more.
In Audrey's case, she comes from a rich family and she's off to her own devices. I mean, I think most kids would enjoy that environment.
I don't know. Have you ever seen a John Hughes movie? They're not all happy to just be left to their own devices. I don't think that's the case for all teenagers.
I don't think it's realistic to think that.
Well, agree to disagree.
I do want to mention that what we watched for this was the European DVD. Back when these AIP films in the Archive collection were getting their releases, they released 8 titles in the US, but 25 in Europe. So this one never had a DVD release in America, and I don't believe it ever had a VHS release in the US either.
Oh.
So this might be the only way to catch this film is from this source, and I don't even know if a better print exists, but it wasn't a pretty print.
No, the top of the movie seemed to be clouding over with complete darkness in a lot of scenes.
Well, I was just noticing the strips going through it too. It had a lot of marking.
Well, it was available for television, so there must have been copies of that somewhere.
Probably 16 millimeter prints. And again, we don't know what condition of those are.
Right.
I'm saying I don't know that there's a negative that's still in existence that this could look any better.
This is one that it would be worth saving, though, restoring in some way. I think this is a really sterling example of AIP's output of the era.
I think so, too. You've got this amazing cast of characters who we'll see again and again. I didn't mention Edmund Cobb, who
barely figures into the plot.
You had mentioned how one scene when the girls are splitting up and going their own separate ways, it kind of looked like the poster.
I thought that they were running to the camera because we see somebody's face. But here we see them running away, but it's the three girls in skirts and their high heels running staggered a certain distance apart from front to back and from side to side. And I think that might have been the inspiration for the movie poster.
And I think that the poster for Runaway Daughters is another one of those iconic posters of the era.
Why do you think it's iconic?
It's not going to stand out the way that Reformed Schoolgirl does.
Or Girls in Prison.
Or Girls in Prison. There's no catfighting in it.
Well, they don't fight each other, which I'm surprised they don't catfight each other, given Lou Rusoff's penchant for that.
Well, that's why he had brought Maureen in. There had to be a catfight in there somewhere.
Of course.
And Miss Petrie. She gets wrestled to the ground.
That's a funny scene because what Angie does is basically pull her gently to the ground. She more or less just sits down under her own steam, but then she sprawls out on the grass as if she's been clobbered. I think she might just be so surprised that a student had the audacity to lay hands on her that she doesn't know what to do, but Angie didn't hurt her in the slightest.
No, and in her day, girls didn't sprawl out on the grass like that.
Not in public. The main disappointment in this movie is that there's so little of them being runaways. I would have liked to see some of the scenes where they stole the car, where they got the bottles of milk, where they meet at the post office, but that's all glossed over. Where I wanted to see them running away. I wanted to see them in the car. Audrey gets this beautiful new car for her birthday, this lovely convertible, and it's on screen for like 20 seconds. We don't get to see very much of it. We don't get to see them running away. It just sort of has already happened. And then we see their dreary, grimy lives in Los Angeles as they try to evade the law. I don't know why. It's Audrey's car. It's in her name. They didn't steal it, but they're 17. Maybe they don't have a right to be out on their own.
Well, no, they're being looked for in that car. So they don't want to be in a car of that description because they don't want to be found.
I don't know why, but the first time I watched this movie, I thought they really did hurt the motorcycle cop because I just couldn't remember that scene. But all he does is he gets a flat tire, he stops his bike, it doesn't tip over or anything, and he calls it into headquarters. Nothing bad happens to him. They didn't do anything that bad.
No, but he called in the car, so they have to dump the car. And
well, they did steal a car. That car was stolen.
Oh, that was a stolen car by then, yeah.
Yeah.
I love how Angie is first to jump out of the car and says, okay, we're doing this now. See ya. And she takes off. Mary and Audrey are left there standing like, okay, I guess we're going to do this now.
I just would have liked to see more of that and less of their terrible home lives being played out in scenes that are kind of repetitive. I think they could have shorthanded that a lot more where, yeah, Mary's dad is terrible and we see him being terrible several times. And Audrey's parents are so permissive and Angie's alone in her apartment all the time. I think we get the point pretty early on. We don't need to keep banging away at that. And I wanted to see more of them on the run.
I think that is the most exciting part of the movie is when they're being runaways. And It is a shame that we didn't get to see those little bits of them stealing the car. And maybe that could have been some sort of a close call. Or,
could have been a lot more opportunity for comedy.
And even just getting the milk because it's just mentioned in a line and then you see them later dropping milk bottles out, but they don't explain where they are or what they did. So you have to remember that. It wasn't that long, but without that visualization, it might be hard to follow.
It would have helped. See them drinking the milk and putting the empty bottles in the back seat. And
something like that.
I could have devoted maybe 10 more minutes to that part of the movie, at least. Because this is a long movie. This is 90 minutes long. And most of the movies, they barely top an hour 15, these early ones. And so it did kind of grind for a while.
And then towards the end, when Angie gets in a car again, it looks like it's going to pick up. There's going to be a chase. It's going to be a little exciting. And it lasts like 5 seconds before she drives over a cliff. Do you think she did that on purpose?
Of course she did it on purpose. That's why she gave such a tender goodbye to Audrey. And Audrey's like, you act like you're on your way to Africa. And Angie knew what was going to happen. She knew that's what she was going to do. She had just determined there's nothing for her here, there's nothing for her there, there's nothing for her anywhere. So yeah, she intentionally killed herself. She didn't even hit the brakes. She just drove straight off the cliff. So she was Thelma or Louise, one or the other. in that
I don't know
case.
who's driving.
It doesn't matter. They both died.
So, Cheryl, how are you going to rate this one? Using our AIP scale where A is awesome, I is intermediate, and P is pathetic.
I think this is another one of those movies that for me rides the cusp between one rating and another. And it's kind of hard for me to pick one or the other because if I pick I, which is one instinct, I think I'm being a little harsh on it because it is a fun movie to watch. But like I said, it drags a lot. There's a lot of repetitive scenes. We're not running away long enough. But I want to also pick A because it's a fun movie to watch. Gloria Castillo is a hoot. Adele Jergens is a hoot in this. Even though the story does end in a very unhappy way for poor Angie, I think it's like a good example of an AIP movie of the era. So what I'm going to do is give it an A minus, but that's still an A, obviously, in our book, because it's a really good movie with lots of room for improvement. But when you look at the AIP catalog, you want a movie like this to be on the top of your list of what to watch. It's got the cast, it's got the crew, it's got the storyline, the theme. It's everything you want in an AIP movie of this era. So A minus, but, A. How about you?
I'm going to agree with a lot of that. The thing about this movie is I hadn't seen this one before, so I didn't know what to expect. I had high hopes, but my expectations were a little lower because it was an earlier film, but it exceeded my expectations for sure. This movie is just so much fun. If there's anything I would change is I would give Marla English's Audrey just a little more personality.
True.
She's kind of dull.
Poor little rich girl.
Yeah, and she doesn't really do anything except feel sorry for herself, and I kind of like to see her do something in this film.
Be more proactive.
I mean, the most exciting thing she does is hold up a wall.
She does have to fight off Tony, who's constantly groping her.
And she does fight with Maureen. She does defend herself in that one instance when she's being teased in the schoolyard.
Your one episode of Spunk.
But as I said before, it's Gloria Castillo who just steals the show here. And it took the second time watching it for me to realize that she wasn't the main character because when she's around, she is the main character.
All the focus is on her.
But I thought this movie was just so much fun. And like you said, it really is what you want from an AIP film of this era. I really enjoy his black and white films. And this one I thought was much better than I expected it to be. And I think it stands out above a lot of them too.
Yeah, it's one of the better 1950s AIP films.
And it's a shame that it's not more well recognized for that today. But I'm going to give this one an A.
I think this movie gets lumped in with all the juvenile delinquent movies that AIP has put out. But this one's got a lot more going for it than those, I think. Because you spend a lot more time with the characters than, let's say, Motorcycle Gang or Drag Strip Girl, where we get a brief glimpse of their home life and then we go on to the drama. Here we get a lot of home life, a lot of character establishment. And I think that is what makes this movie a better than average juvenile delinquent AIP movie.
Well, usually if you see a home life, it's because Raymond Hatton is their father.
Or uncle.
And that's all we get. And here we had a couple of sets of parents. We learned a lot about Angie's parents just by the fact that they're not there.
They must be rich too, or at least the new husbands must be rich if she can afford cruises and extended vacations.
Yeah, they seem to be
honeymoons.
Pretty well off too.
And still keep house for their daughter back home.
So yeah, this movie is another A for me.
The AIP podcast website is aippod.com. And that's a great place for you to visit. There we have posters from the movie, lobby cards, trailers, information about our other episodes, and links to our podcast, a comment form where you can engage with us. Let us know what movies you'd like to see next. Maybe they'll be on the list. And let us know your opinions of the films that we've watched, whether they match ours or not. That's aippod.com.
And that's our cue to run away for the American International Podcast. I'm Jeff Markin.
I'm Cheryl Lightfoot.
And we'll meet you at the drive-in. Follow the American International Podcast on Instagram and Letterboxd at AIP_pod and on Facebook at facebook.com/American International Podcast.
The American International Podcast is produced and edited by Jeff Markin.
A man whose mind is distorted by hatred.
And Cheryl Lightfoot.
A girl hungry for too many things.
The American International Podcast is part of the Pop Culture Entertainment Network.